Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this meeting of the Durham County Council Planning Committee. My name is Councillor John Robinson. I chair the committee and I will be chairing today's meeting. Welcome to the remote meeting of the Planning Committee taking place now on the 2nd of December 2020. The meeting is being recorded live to the Council's website and will be able to be viewed for a minimum of 6 months. So please be aware that any footage from the meeting can be used in subsequent media broadcasts. I would like to give a warm welcome to the members of the Council, to the officers and any member of the public or media who are watching this live feed of the meeting, and also a special welcome to the members of the public who are about to take part. Before we commence with the formal business of the agenda, I would like to cover some housekeeping matters. One, please, will you mute your microphone? To speak, use the chat function on the right-hand side. On that chat function, if you type RTS, request to speak, we will then be able to see you. But please remember, whatever you put in there, every member of the committee and the public are able to see. When invited to speak by myself, please remember to unmute yourself, otherwise nobody can hear what you're saying. Once invited to speak, please introduce yourself with your name and your position, unless you've already introduced yourself earlier in the meeting. If you are having issues with connectivity, try switching off your video and use the telephone function. If connectivity issues continue, you may have to leave the meeting and rejoin. If for any reason I lose connection, then the Vice Chairman, Councillor Mr. Fraser Tinsley, will take over until my connection is restored. We always begin, ladies and gentlemen, by introducing the officers in attendance today, and with that today will be no exception. So please can I begin with Claire Cuskin, our legal advisor. Claire, could you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, good morning. I am Claire Cuskin and I'm the legal advisor to the committee.
Then the important one, I think, because she's controlling everything, Jill.
Hello, good morning. I'm Jill Errington. I'm the committee officer for the meeting.
Thank you, Jill. Lucy.
Good morning, Chair. Committee Services, Lucy Gladders.
Good morning. Colin.
Good morning, Chair. Colin Harding, Senior Planning Officer, Case Officer for the first application.
Good morning, Colin. Henry.
Good morning, Chair. Henry Jones, Principal Planning Officer. I'll be presenting the second item at Wingate.
Okay, Mr. McGargle, John.
Good morning, Chair. John McGargill, Highways Development Manager.
Good morning, John. And finally, Brian Wetherill. Nothing yet? No, well, Brian will no doubt join us. So if we move to the agenda, ladies and gentlemen, item 1, apologies for absence. Jill, Mrs. Errington.
Chair, we have apologies from councillors Karen Hawley, Alan Shield, Simon Wilson and Audrey Lang.
And then can we have substitute members?
Chair, we have Councillor Mark Davidson for Councillor Simon Wilson.
OK. Good morning, Mark. Thank you very much, as always. You're our super sub, so thank you very much for joining us, Mark. Can we then move on to the minutes of the meeting held on the 28th of July? Does any member have any comment before we move on? No. Can we accept the minutes?
Agreed, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. OK, John, you would like to make a comment on last month's minutes. John, over to you, Mr. McGargle.
Yeah, good morning, Chair. Thank you for allowing me to speak. At the last planning committee, I had said that I'd been accused of lying to committee by a local member regarding the application for a residential development at Mill Lane at Sherburn. My statement was made to highlight that had been a very emotive, prolonged and ongoing opposition to the development since 2015. I must apologise, however, that on reflection my statement was misleading. Whilst I had received a mail from a local member in 2016, it did in fact contain an allegation from his constituent that I had lied to committee. I must therefore clarify the allegation was not made direct from the local member. It was made by his constituent. As such, I accept I was wrong to make the statement. I've apologised to the local member and I must apologise to you, Chair, and members of the committee for my inaccuracy. I don't believe my comments influenced in any way the debate and consequent decision of the committee, but I accept it was unnecessary and indeed unprofessional. Thank you, Chair, for allowing me to put this record straight.
No, thank you, John, for the professional way you've done it. Thank you very much. We can now move on to item 4, declaration of interest. Do we have any? No. Therefore, item 5, applications to be determined by this morning's County Planning Committee. The first item is land to the south of Long Edge Lane, Eliza Lane Concert. This first application is proposed 37 holiday lodges, including 9 highly accessible lodges and 1 manager's lodge, and with it a play barn and associated farm experience. We have 5 registered speakers for this item. On behalf of Blanchester Parish Council, Councillor David Freisner, County Councillor Alex Watson from the adjoining ward, Maria Suddas, Joe Ridgedon, Lorna Adamson and Helen Hodge. Maria Suddas is unable to participate in the meeting and has submitted a written representation which will be read out to the committee. We've also have local member Councillor Jude Constantine in attendance to observe, and we've earlier on heard from Councillor Mr Jewell that Councillor Mrs Brown has also sent out an email to members. So without further ado, can I please hand over to Colin Harden. Once again, good morning, Colin, and can you present your report?
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll just upload it for you. If someone could indicate that you can see it when it appears on screen, I'd be grateful.
That's come up.
Thank you. This planning application seeks permission for 37 holiday lodges, including 1 manager's lodge, a farm experience and associated play barn. At this point, I should clarify that there is an error in the description of the application, which currently states that the application seeks permission for 37 holiday lodges, including 10 accessible lodges. It is in fact the case that the manager's lodge, although to be delivered on that part of the site hosting the accessible lodges, would not itself be adapted or available for rental. This means that in terms of the mix of lodges, 27 would be of a standard design and available for holiday purchase, 9 would be highly accessible and available for rent, and there would also be a single manager's lodge. Accordingly, wherever my report makes mention of 10 highly accessible lodges, this should in fact be read as 9. This is a site location plan.
Sorry to interrupt, Colin. Councillor Mr Clare is having problems. It's saying you can't display content. Is any other member having problem?
Yes, I'm not getting the.
So is it possible, Colin, for you to take it off and reload it? Are we getting it now, John? Sorry, Councillor Clare, have you got it? Do you want to start the presentation, Colin?
Yeah, I'll start from the beginning again, just so everyone's clear.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
This planning application seeks permission for 37 holiday lodges, including 1 manager's lodge, a farm experience and associated play barn. At this point, I should clarify that there is an error in the description of the application, which currently states that the application seeks permission for 37 holiday lodges, including 10 accessible lodges. It is in fact the case that the manager's lodge, although to be delivered on that part of the site hosting accessible lodges, would not itself be adapted or available for rental. This means that in terms of the mix of lodges, 27 would be of standard design and available for holiday purchase, 9 would be highly accessible and available for rent, and there would also be a single manager's lodge. Accordingly, wherever my report makes mention of 10 highly accessible lodges, this should in fact be read as 9. This is the site location plan with the application site outlined in red. It extends to approximately 11.4 hectares and comprises of agricultural land associated with Woodlands Park Farm. The site itself forms part of a larger triangle of agricultural land bounded by Long Edge Lane, Eliza Lane and Millers Hill Lane. The residential properties within this triangle are Sheepwalks Farm, which is located immediately to the southwest of the application site, Chapel View, Pond View and Jasmine Cottage, which lie at the northwestern corner of the triangle, approximately 800 metres to the west of the application site, whilst Woodland Parks Farm itself is located to the northeast of the site. Within the wider area, there is a collection of dwellings at Broad Meadows to the southwest of the site, where there is also an existing small touring caravan site. It is also worth noting the location of Nitsley Mill to the north of the site, which effectively forms the southern extremity of the Nitsley Delves Lane Concert settlement. As is evident from the map, the area is known to contain archaeological remains relating to a Roman dam and aqueduct, which served the Roman fort of Longovicium. This is actually a scheduled monument. Topographically, the site effectively lies on the northern shoulder of a broad ridge that runs west to east between Oxenlaw and Humber Hill. In terms of connections, the A68 can be seen running on a north-south axis to the west of the site, and the Wascley Way and Lanchester Railway Path cycle and recreation routes can be seen running west to east to the north of the site. Although currently in use as agricultural grazing, there is evidence that the site has previously formed an area of woodland formerly known as Angle Wood, and the site does currently feature an established shelter belt of trees on its western boundary, measuring approximately 30 metres in depth. The northern boundary of the site takes the form of a mature roadside hedgerow and verge associated with Long Edge Lane, and the southern and eastern boundaries are formed by field boundary hedgerows. This slide shows a slightly larger scale plan of the immediate surroundings of the application site. You can see Sheepwalks Farm, which is the neighbouring property to the southwest of the site, and Woodlands Park Farm is to the northeast, just to the east of where it says Roman Aqueduct. This is an aerial photograph of the site. It more clearly shows the site's relationship with surrounding land uses. Sheepwalks Farm is visible, as is the applicant's property at Woodlands Park Farm. The site will be served by two accesses from Long Edge Lane, and the site can be broadly divided into three areas. To the west of the site are located the accessible holiday lodges and the manager's lodge. To the south would be the farm experience and play barn, and the eastern part of the site would host holiday lodges which would be available for purchase. The red hashed area on this plan is the existing high pressure gas pipeline and required standoff distance. Here we have the proposed phasing plan. Full details of the proposed phasing are set out within my report, but briefly, the area washed in light green would be delivered first and would comprise structural landscaping, the play barn and farm experience, both accesses and part of the access road, as well as 3 rental lodges and the manager's lodge on the western part of the site. It is expected that this would be delivered within the first 2 years of the development. Following this, starting in year 2, the first of the lodges for sale on the eastern part of the site will begin to be delivered, along with further rental lodges. This phase is shown dashed in dark green. The remainder of the development would thereafter be delivered over approximately a 10-year period. Officers consider that a key consideration in the acceptability of the proposed development is a delivery of the development in a phased manner, and the potential impacts of the development on the eastern part of the site before structural planting delivered in phase 1A of the development has had a chance to mature fully. This plan shows the footprints of the various proposed lodge types. 2 accessible lodges are indicated on the left, and the 5 types of holiday lodge for sale are shown on the right. And it shows a range of different size lodges available for purchase as well as surround. This slide shows a proposed layout of a 2-bedroomed accessible lodge, demonstrating adaptations in the form of access ramp, larger sized bathrooms and bedrooms, and simplified layout to allow ease of wheelchair manoeuvring. And this is the 3-bedroom variant of the accessible lodges. Here we have the elevational detail of the proposed accessible lodges. Although this plan is somewhat cluttered with dimensions, By comparison, it shows an indicative layout of one of the standard holiday lodges. Whilst these are certainly not inaccessible, it can be seen that the layout does not indicate particular adaptations, which we saw on the previous slides. However, as stated in my report, it is worth considering that not all visitors to the site who have specific needs, mental health issues or disabilities would necessarily need physical adaptations or indeed highly accessible lodges. This is a further indicative layout of a holiday lodge for sale. And here we have a range of some of the elevations of the proposed lodges for sale. All are timber clad and with either a monopitch or dual pitch roof. These are the proposed elevations for the play barn. Although it is undeniably a large building, but is of an agricultural scale and form. Again, the dimensions on this drawing don't help with its interpretation for the purposes of this presentation, but I'll talk you through how the play barn will be laid out. You have the covered entrance at the northwest, sort of top left-hand corner there. That has two entrances. One leads directly to a classroom, and the other one leads into a reception area which has toilets. You would then move through into a cafe and play area, which would include tractor play, gym, and a ball pool. Within this area, there are rooms leading off, 2 sensory rooms and 3 quiet rooms with a quiet waiting room. And there's also an event room located within the play barn. This is a photograph of the site. It's a large area of the site. At the rear of the shot, the existing woodland shelter belt that forms the western boundary of the site can be clearly seen, as can an existing hedgerow that bisects part of the site and forms part of the site's southern boundary. There would be some development, primarily the farm experience and play barn, that would be located beyond this hedgerow. However, all of the holiday lodges would be located within the field that forms the foreground of the picture. You can see Sheepwalks Farm on the horizon to the left of the photograph. This is a similar view taken from the same location but rotated slightly towards the south. It shows the same field in the foreground, with Sheepwalks Farm and the western boundary shelter belt this time visible on the horizon towards the right of shot. In the areas towards the left of the shot would be located drainage ponds, and it is not expected that the hedge line will be breached here, and that's the hedgerow that forms the southern boundary of the site. The following slides are a series of photo montages provided by the applicant to aid in understanding how the development might appear over time in 2 particular views. Clearly this is a limited range of views, and there's only 2, and may not be representative of the impact from all locations, and indeed are only simulated views. Nevertheless, they do provide some illustration as to how the development might appear. This first view is from a similar location to the photographs we've just seen. I think the photographs were actually taken from the vicinity of the field gate, whereas this is from a further back on Long Edge Lane itself. This is a crop version of the same view, with a photo montage simulation of the development in Year 5. Young structural planting can be seen on the eastern boundary of the site, with lodge development visible behind. The same view as simulated in Year 15 of the development. Structural planting on the eastern boundary has now matured in this view, although there remains limited visibility of the lodges behind it. This slide shows a view from Eliza Lane looking northwest towards the site. Sheepwalks Farm is visible to the left of shot. The site itself lies largely behind a hedgerow in the middle distance. The western boundary shelter belt can also be seen on the horizon. This is a crop view from the same location, but with the development as seen in Year 5 added in the form of photo montage. The roofs of some of the lodges can be seen amongst young planting. This is the same view, but in Year 15. Again, the planting has now matured somewhat. However, it is clear there is still some visibility of lodges within the site from this location. Since publication of the report, 2 further letters of representation have been received, raising the issues of whether there is a requirement for the application to be advertised as a departure from the development plan, and whether the correct EIA screening process has been carried out. Officers have considered these comments. We consider that the application has been appropriately advertised. It's been advertised with a press notice, site notices, and by means of individual notification letters to neighbouring residents. And the officers have also considered whether the development would constitute EIA development, and we consider that it does not. A more detailed summary of the representations received is included in my recommendation report. However, the main points to note are that in terms of statutory and internal consultees, only the council's landscape team continue to raise concerns with regards to this development, noting that it would have an adverse landscape impact, particularly in the early part of the development before structural landscaping has had a chance to mature. Objections have also been raised by Lanchester Parish Council. Remaining statutory internal and external consultees raised no objections, subject to suitable conditions and informatives. Overall, 68 letters of public objection have now been received. These objections relate to a wide range of matters, including the need for development, nature and future of the development, location and scale of the development, landscape impact, highway safety, economic impact, impacts upon residential amenity, and impacts upon biodiversity and archaeology. 301 letters of support have been raised, mainly raising issues relating to the need for facilities for those with special needs, mental ill health, dementia and ASD, landscape impact and positive economic impacts. The acceptability of this application should be considered in the context of the planning balance test contained within paragraph 11D of the NPPF. Therefore, in order to justify the refusal of plan permission, any adverse impacts of a proposed development must significantly and demonstrably outweigh any benefits. Whilst the development would undoubtedly have some adverse impacts, most notably with regards to landscape impact, but also in terms of residential amenity, lack of access by means of sustainable travel and increased levels of car usage, as well as the loss of agricultural land, there would also be a positive impact in terms of boosting the local economy and tourism economy of the wider county through the delivery of holiday accommodation where there's a recognised under provision, and the provision of 9 highly accessible lodges. Additionally, the farm experience and play barn would represent farm diversification, as well as providing facilities for use by community groups, and the development as a whole would deliver 8 jobs. There would also be biodiversity net gain. The proposal has generated significant public interest, both for and against the proposal, with a wide range of views offered and issues raised. These have been taken into account and addressed within the report. On balance, officers consider that the concerns raised by objectives were not felt to be of sufficient weight to justify the refusal of this application in light of the benefits of the scheme and the ability to impose conditions and secure planning obligations under Section 39 of the Wildlife and Countryside Act. The application is therefore recommended for approval.
Thank you very much, Colin, and thank you to all the members who tried and were able to access the presentation. We now move over to people who wish to comment. Can I advise those members of the public wishing to comment and fellow councillors, you will have 5 minutes in which to do your presentation. Jill Errington will, a minute before that 5 minutes up, give you some warning to say please start and think about winding up because your minute is up, and when your 5 minutes is up she will actually intervene and say thank you very much. So if we can begin, and I do apologise immediately in case I pronounce your surname wrong. Councillor Freisner, representing Lanchester Parish Council, would you like to address the meeting, please?
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm Councillor David Freisner, Chair of the Planning Committee of Lanchester Parish Council, speaking on behalf of the Council. Thank you for agreeing to this request to have this application determined by your committee, and thank you for the opportunity to address the committee. Lanchester Parish Council objects to this application on several material grounds, as stated in our original letter. Unacceptable development in the open countryside, new buildings on open farmland, the large-scale size, setting, integration of the development, the residential lodge use for the manager, landscape impact, impact on Roman heritage assets, visual impact and loss of amenity, especially for the neighbouring properties, adverse light and noise impact, and traffic and highways issues. We note the amended description, which reconfirms our concerns regarding the development, and we question the specialist nature of it, especially since it is intended that almost 3/4 of the lodges will be sold. After several years of comprehensive development, the Lanchester Neighbourhood Plan was examined earlier this year. The referendum planned for this summer has now been postponed because of the current COVID crisis. Recommended changes by the examiner will aid clarity of use. All policies are retained. In fact, the examiner congratulated us, resulting in over 170 locations of heritage assets which formed part of the plan. Our evaluation is that the policies in the Lanchester Neighbourhood Plan should still be given significant weight in determining this application. The development is contrary to and in conflict with the following policies of the plan: LMP2, design of new development; LMP3, the historic environment; LMP4, green spaces; and 4A, green infrastructure; 4B, landscape improvement; 4C, landscape features; 4D, biodiversity and geodiversity; and 4E, local views. We do not consider that proposed management and mitigation measures will be realistic or sustainable. In fact, the officer's report confirms that will be a transformative and adverse impact on the character of this location. Indeed, the report confirms its locational sustainability is poor. The report confirms there will be adverse landscape impact and an adverse impact on residential amenity. Chair, this is not an example of small-scale rural diversification of existing buildings in the countryside. It's a substantial commercial development within the open countryside, on open farmland, where no buildings currently exist. The nearest neighbours literally live just over the wall away. Many other objections from local neighbours clearly demonstrate and support our view that the setting, character, size and scale of the development in this very rural part of the parish and county is just not appropriate and will have an adverse impact in so many ways. We urge the committee to take full consideration of the Lanchester Neighbourhood Plan, all of the associated adverse impacts, and to vote to refuse this application. Thank you.
No, thank you, Councillor Friesner, for being within the 5 minutes. Thank you very much, sir. We now move on. Whilst Councillor Watson is not a local member, Councillor Watson, Alex, is actually a member representing an adjoining ward and did make a request to speak. So, Alex, over to you. Councillor Watson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm speaking in support of this application, which is extremely important to the economy, creating trade and, importantly, jobs, but of greater significance, addressing the lack of facilities for our disabled citizens, both physically and mentally, who have suffered immensely for many years through lack of funding, always struggling to maintain their existing facilities. And of course, COVID-19 have clearly made the situation worse. Indeed, our Cabinet Member for Children and Young People's Services, Alwyn Gunn, has recently wrote to the Secretary of State for Education, appealing for more funding for children and young people with special educational needs and disability, and support for pupils at risk of exclusion. It's not a profit-making development, but more of an altruistic project with quality development, assisting ultimately the maintenance and development of much more improvements for those with special needs. It's ultimately a multi-million investment that could help put Durham County Council on the map as a visionary authority. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Helen. Alex. Can we now move on to the objectors? Jill, could you kindly read out Mrs. Sudda's letter of objection before we go into actual people speaking?
Thanks, Chair. Mrs. Suddas says, I would like to start off by saying hello. I'm Maria Suddas, who lives at Sheepwalks Farm, adjacent to the planning application. My family and I have lived here now for nearly 25 years, and this planning project is going to massively change this beautiful, quiet area. I would also like to say I think this project is a wonderful idea, but I think it's in the wrong place. It's right on our doorstep, and this will have a big impact on our privacy, especially with a 3-foot wall separating the property. There is also the impact of the noise level from 150 visitors that is expected daily, plus the occupants in the lodges from having nothing there at all. The boundary ends in the middle of an open field, and the worry is that this project will creep right across right in front of our home and our neighbours on a later date in the near future. There is also the road safety on Eliza Lane, noted where the planning intends to be, but the entrance to the lodges is on Long Edge Lane, this being a road that doesn't get many walkers because it's a fast, dangerous road. The traffic will hit Eliza Lane more because of sat navigation. This road is known for a shortcut from the A68. This is the road we use from our property and where my son, grandchildren, dog walkers, cyclists and I go walking. So how safe will this road be with more added traffic? My son is partially blind and I have asthma, and walking is the only exercise we do. This is a beautiful, safe place to go walking, and my son is now worried how this will affect his safety. My son is limited to what he can do and will never be able to drive a car. He relies on we as his parents or taxis for transport, as there are no bus routes here. When you drive out onto Eliza Lane, just up on the right of the road, it's on an incline and the traffic does fly down this road so fast, I've had to stop quick pulling out because it's not a flat road and you can't see clearly. Maybe we need a lower speed limit putting in place on country roads, especially in winter times as they don't get gritted. Safety should always come first. This has been a safe and beautiful environment. Please don't take our safe and peaceful life away from us all. Sometimes change isn't always a good thing. Kind regards, Maria Suddas. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill, for that. So we now move on to supporters. Good morning to Mr. Ridgton, Mrs. Adamson and Helen Hodge. In fact, I can see Helen Hodge, and it was looking at Helen that earlier on made me say Helen. The issues we've got here are Mr. Ridgton and Mrs. Adamson, you're down for 4 minutes, which then allows Helen Hodge and a minute herself to represent Learning Life. So you actually, Mr. Ridgton and Mrs. Adamson, will be stopped after 4 minutes. So I don't know who's going first, whether it's Mr. Ridgton or Mrs. Adamson, but we're over to yourselves.
Yeah, Chair, can I just say that I'm going to get Mrs. Adamson to say his statement and then I can answer any questions. So we're going to do it that way, if that's okay.
Whichever way you want, it's your 4 minutes. So Mrs. Adamson, you have 4 minutes.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, councillors. My name is Lorna Adamson, and I'd like to thank you on behalf of my husband Ian and I for allowing us this opportunity to read out our statement. Ian has lived at Woodlands Park Farm for more than 40 years, and in that time has loved and nurtured the landscape that surrounds our farm. We fully understand how important nature and the countryside is, and would not do anything we felt would spoil this beautiful area in which we and our neighbours live. The inspiration for our project came when observing the calming effects of being in the countryside and connecting with nature and farm animals that had on our step-grandson Shane. When he first joined our family, aged 2, he had extremely challenging behaviours. Now aged 12 and diagnosed as someone with special educational needs and disabilities, it's remarkable to see how gentle he is when handling animals, even newborn chickens. We conducted our own research and found that although there are several centres for disabled children, these tend to be somewhat institutional and don't provide for siblings who are not disabled, leaving them largely on the sidelines. On the other hand, most mainstream visitor attractions, visit theme parks, zoos, farm parks, etc., do their best to accommodate disabled children, but are generally not fully accessible, leaving the disabled child on the sideline. There seems to be no provision in this middle ground, an attraction that the whole family can enjoy together, whether disabled or not, in a non-judgmental, quiet environment. Suitable holiday accommodation can also be an issue for families who have someone with special needs. Our research found families reluctant to travel too far from home, as quite often a person with special needs will also have complex medical needs, and therefore they need to stay within reach of the hospital that the person attends. Our accessible lodges have been designed to cater for a range of mobility and sensory issues. Families renting these lodges will also have access to the Farm Experience Centre. We hope that some visitors renting our accommodation will decide to purchase a lodge from us so that they have the option to adapt the living space to their specific needs. To ensure that the accessible lodges from the Farm Experience Centre will be tranquil and provide a retreat experience, we've set out management plans for both elements, which can be conditioned to ensure that this does happen. We've worked proactively with the council officers to be able to deliver our dream project. The project has been landscape-led to ensure that we are minimising any impact on the landscape while providing a farm experience for those that would otherwise find it difficult to access such a facility. We've spoken with families, local bodies, charities, businesses and individuals to understand exactly what the demand is. We've created a partnership with Learning for Life, who are a specialist provider in the North East.
You have a minute left.
Together we'll provide some work experience opportunities for young adults with special needs. This project is hugely important for many families, as can be seen in the letters of support, not only in support of the planning application itself, but also from families who've taken the time to write to tell us how much our project will mean to them, for which we are hugely grateful. This level of support has motivated us to continue with our vision, despite the many hurdles we've negotiated to bring us to where we are today. There's a huge need for this type of service, and we'd love the opportunity to be able to provide this unique farm experience in our area for all families, especially those with special needs. Thank you for your time, ladies and gentlemen. Either myself or our planning consultant, Joe Ridgen, would be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, Mrs. Adamson. And I know your husband was worried about the paper being up, but it's what you have to say, not what we saw. So thank you very much, Mrs. Adamson. Can we now move on to Helen Hodge? Helen, you're going to give us a perspective from Learning for Life, and you've got 1 minute.
Thank you very much, everybody. I'll try and get through this very quickly. I live in very close proximity to the proposed site. I'm half a mile away. I can't see there being any problems whatsoever regarding traffic or anything at all like that. All I can think is positive things for this project. I've visited the site. It's perfect. It impacts on not anybody that I can see apart from the farm that is behind. However, I do think that Lorna and Ian are doing something to help that. So that the owners, as far as I'm concerned, of the land have been very sympathetic to the area. The plans and the buildings, the blend into the countryside. I work with young people with multiple disabilities and learning difficulties, and I think, having visited the site, it is an absolutely perfect opportunity, particularly since COVID. I think COVID has made us all realise just how much people need to be out in the countryside. Some people don't get very far from the, to the countryside, and a lot of people in urban areas, they don't have the opportunity to do that. And I think this is a particularly wonderful, unique set of circumstances that we could possibly be a part of.
Chair, sorry to interrupt. That was a minute.
Okay, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Hodge. Okay, so thank you, Jill. Thank you for that. We have to stick rigidly because everybody's told the same, no matter whichever committee, and it's only fair to stick to the rules. So can we move now on to any of the members of the committee have any questions of either the speakers for or against? Mark, Councillor, Mr. Wilkes, you'd like to come in first? You'd like to speak to the applicant?
Good morning, John. It's a very quick question. On the proposed layout plan, the boundary line at the moment shows absolutely nothing between the field at the bottom of the plan to the south and the actual boundary line where the recreation area, the play barn and the animal grazing paddocks are, and that is extremely close to the farm. What I'm not really following here is why, when you've got the opportunity to put a proper boundary, hedge, fence, trees, whatever, there doesn't appear to be that on the plan. And I'm wondering if someone could clarify for me, either planners or the applicant, why there isn't that boundary being inserted, because it almost looks as though at some point in the future the rest of that field could just be opened up and used, because otherwise why not put something in there to help to screen the development from the neighbouring farm. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mark, and that follows on from the comment made by Mrs. Sidders. Mr. Ridgton, do you want to reply to that?
Yes, it's quite simple in that we have to deliver biodiversity net gain. There's a plan showing how that will be done, and that area will be used to be improved through planting of meadows and various other types of planting to ensure that we can deliver that biodiversity net gain. Mr. Harding mentioned the Section 39 agreement that was been asked to enter into, to make sure that is the case. And then specifically in relation to tree planting, that has a higher likelihood of impacting on archaeology basically. So the roots would go down. So there's a bit of a balancing act between putting hedging in and tree screening and making sure that we don't have an adverse impact on archaeology. It looks like it's a great big site, but there's a lot of constraints that we're dealing with to make sure that we tick all the boxes from that side of application.
Okay, thank you. I know I've got John wanting to come in, but Mark, you want to follow up on what's been answered to your question?
Yeah, I just I don't necessarily agree with the point that archaeology would stop somebody in this site when there's so much development going on across an 11-hectare site. Why archaeology would stop you from putting in a little bit of screening for the nearest neighbour, and if there's going to be biodiversity on the rest of the site, I fail to understand why that isn't possible. The biggest concern I have here is the impact on the neighbouring property. Generally, I would be supportive of what's being proposed, but if the property's so close to this development, so a property that's been in the countryside with nothing developed around it for decades, hundreds of years possibly, I don't know how old that property is, it just seems to be too much of an impact on that neighbouring property when there is a solution there. It's just my personal view, Chair, but I'll listen to what everybody else has to say before making a final decision.
Thank you, Mike. Colin Harding wants to come back in on what you, in response to the answer. Is Colin, you want to come back in on this specific point? It's just I've got Councillor Clare who asked to speak a while ago.
Councillor Clare wants to speak first, Chair. That's fine. I was just going to just elaborate on the question Mark, Councillor Wilkes asked.
No, we'll just elaborate on Councillor Wilkes' question, and then we know where we are.
Yeah, I was just going to just confirm really what Mr. Ridgton said, and that there is actually a landscape plan which I didn't actually include in the presentation. Just interesting for everybody really. As Mr. Ridgton said, that southern boundary is left for biodiversity purposes. The proposed landscaping plan would be secured by condition, so we would expect it to be delivered like that. There would also be a Section 39, a legal agreement under Section 39 of the Wildlife and Conservation Act, which is to do a long-term management of biodiversity net gain. So that would also be would provide some security in terms of the retention of that area as an open space. And this is, I think, the area as well that Councillor Wilkes is referring to is actually partially within the standoff area for the high pressure gas pipeline. So again, that would generally preclude any development in that area anyway. And within the point about the archaeology, I think the point Mr. Ridgton is making is that northwestern corner, that the applicants sought to keep the development away from there because that is the area, following the geophysical survey and the trial trenching that's taken place, that's the area where we know where the most sensitive archaeology on the site is. So that may not necessarily prevent development per se, but anything which would move away from this particular layout would obviously require a further permission or a variation, and we'd have to look at the impact of building on that area of sensitivity as part of that. And I think that's just the point of clarification I wanted to make.
Thank you, Colin. Mr. Adamson, could you? I know, Mrs. Adamson, you want to speak. I'll bring you back in later. But can you switch your microphone off, Mrs. Adamson, because it's bringing a noise in. Has anybody got the mic on that shouldn't have the mic on? Because it's causing background noise, and one of the members is concerned about hearing. No? Councillor Mr. Clare. John, can I say thank you for the email you sent out to get clarification on numbers, and that did help earlier on this morning. So can we move over to Councillor John Clare?
I'll be wanting to make a comment later after I've heard what some of my colleagues on the committee have to say, John. But I do have two questions at this point. The first one is regarding the accessibility measures being taken in the 9 lodges which are being denoted as accessible. So far I have heard, and I apologise if there's things I've missed, but I've heard there's got to be a ramp up to the door, that there's going to, I read in the notes that there's going to be an accessible bathroom, and that the lodges will have extra space for wheelchair manoeuvrability within them. So I'm interested to know if there's anything. So if somebody could just tell me all the accessible features which will make these lodges accessible, that would be smashing. And the second question, John, is to the officer. I'm noting that there are 27 lodges that are going to be sold. Now I am presuming that then they will be able to use those lodges how they will, and that some of those people will be using it as a private kind of holiday boat hole, their own holiday lodge just for them and their family, and others may be choosing to rent those out to other people, and we have absolutely no control over that process. After that, there will be nobody controlling that process after the thing is constructed. So those are the two questions, John. If somebody could answer them for me, please. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Thank you, Mr. Ridston. Do you want to attempt to answer the two questions, and then if not, if you can't, I'll bring in Henry.
Yes, I suppose the first thing to mention is that the accessible lodges, it's not just basically not all disabilities require physical adaptation. So there are 9, as Mr. Harding pointed out, that will have those physical adaptations, so wider corridors, demonstrating that you can get a wheelchair through it. The intention is that the site itself will be tranquil and a relaxed setting, and that's going to be controlled by condition, and there's a management plan that's been submitted as part of the application, and that's basically how the council will be able to control to make sure that the type of use is acceptable. I think the level access is pretty important. I'm sure you'll have seen holiday accommodation where everything's up on blocks and things like that. The landscape setting itself gives that opportunity to have level access, which is important. I think the way that it will be run is probably not like a sort of a standard commercial development, and I know that Lorna and Ian's intention is that the people who use the visitor, like the rental accommodation, they'll be the ones that they're hoping to attract to come and purchase the unit. It'll be that tranquil and relaxed setting which is going to be so key to making this a suitable extension to the farm experience centre.
Thank you, Joe. Colin, do you want to come back in?
Thank you, Chair. The only thing I'll add really is in terms of the tenure, I guess, of the sale lodges. As Councillor Clare stated, these would be for purchase, and there'll be nothing in planning in terms of preventing being from sublet. However, the site as a whole will be subject to a management plan, which is secured by condition. So therefore, we'd expect, in operational terms, whether the lodges are occupied by their owners or subsequently sublet, that everyone will be adhering to the measures set out in that management plan with regards to how the site operates in terms of noise, activity, physical alterations, general behaviour, etc. I think that's really all I'd add on that is that really.
Thank you, Colin. Ivan, Councillor Jewell, you've got a question?
Yes, Councillor Jewell here, Councillor for Burnopfield and Dipton Division. I've listened to some concerns about the proximity to the neighbouring farm. What I would like to know is sort of what is the actual distance. Another concern that was expressed was that piece of land could be easily extended into. I mean, I think what we've got to remember is we're considering this application, and if these people wanted to extend in the future, it would have to go through the process again. So I don't think it's right to say that it leaves itself open for further development. Thank you.
Does anybody want to answer Councillor Jewell's first question?
If I can, Chair, I'm happy to do that.
Thank you, Colin.
Yeah, it's as set out in the report, really. I mean, Sheepwalks Farm is obviously immediately adjacent. Just bear with me, I'm just scanning my report to try and find where I said what the exact distance was, but I think it's about 40 metres from the boundary of from sort of the nearest circulation area within the application site to the boundary of Sheepwalks Farm. And that's a path within the woodland. And then I think you also need to bear in mind that I think the actual farmhouse of Sheepwalks Farm is actually beyond some agricultural buildings, so it's actually slightly further away again from the actual boundary of Sheepwalks Farm. So I think that's the two key relationships. I would also note as well that it's a farm experience element of the development which is located in that part of the site which is closest to the neighbouring dwelling. So I think that's also something that members should factor into their considerations.
Thank you for that. I find that acceptable, and what else I note it is within an appropriate distance. Thanks very much.
Colin, you can see the chat line is same as I can. Councillor Mr. Wilkes is asking about the gas pipeline or whatever. Mr. Ridgeton, can you see our chat line as well?
Yes.
Would you like to answer Councillor Mr. Wilkes' comment on the pipeline being 100 metres away?
Yes, I don't know whether it's possible to put the layout back up, because that is probably the easiest way to describe it. But basically, and that 100 metres probably answers the questions about the immunity concerns that have been raised. The layout, the lodges will be to the north of the pipeline, and the farm experience will be to the south. So in relation to the residential property, about 200 metres away from the farm experience centre and 350 metres to the nearest lodges. I think trying to understand Councillor Mark Wilkes' question, I think that's in relation to could we put some additional planting or screen planting along that boundary. We did look at that, and that was something that we obviously considered as well. There's existing woodland that actually block that direct line of sight already. So from a landscape point of view, and obviously we appreciate that this was very much a landscape-led development, the landscape architect working with the council officers come up with a scheme that is acceptable in landscape terms, because there is no sort of direct line of sight from the residential property to the unit.
Thank you, Mr. Ridgeton. Councillor Miss Atkinson, Jim, you want to speak?
Hi, good morning, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Can you hear me? Yeah. I've just got a couple of clarification issues here. I think they're probably questions for Henry. On my notes on the other issues on page 34, I'm just looking for some kind of relevance and to try and understand it a little bit better. It would be disrespectful to approve this development in the light of the awful incident that occurred. So in terms of relevance, I'd like to try and understand if you can explain that a little bit better, what we thinking process is for that. And that's on page 34. And on pages 41, there's the restricted occupancy. I'd like a little bit more clarification on that as well. That's item 108. It's important to note the lodges on the site would be restricted in terms of occupancy. So we're talking about disabled and that. It looks like anybody can have one. And then on page, that's on item 108 and 109. And just the gas pipe that we've got to mention, that's on page 51. So it's got to mention for a reason. I mean, the company who's in charge of the gas pipe don't think it's a problem, but it did get a mention. Is it really not important at all? Are there any real dangers? Or if you can just clarify from a technical point of view, what the dangers may or may not be, or there is absolutely no chance of any problem coming from that gas pipe. So if Henry or anybody else qualified can answer those questions.
Mr. Ridgton, I think as it refers to the report, we should ask the officer rather than put you on the spot. Colin, would you like to answer to Councillor Atkinson's questions? Yes,
thank you, Chair. I'll deal with the occupancy query first. See, those two paragraphs on the report simply set out that there would be no restriction on who could occupy any of the lodges. You know, anybody could ring up to book one of the highly accessible lodges. There's nothing in planning terms that would prevent someone from doing that. So I think it's just making the point that these highly accessible lodges wouldn't necessarily be for the exclusive use of particular people. The park as a whole, even the sale lodges, would be subject to a condition preventing permanent occupancy, i.e. you couldn't move in and live there as your primary address. There's a condition proposed to prevent that happening. In terms of the gas pipeline, obviously the site is crossed by a high pressure gas pipeline. That is part of our sort of statutory requirements in terms of consulting various bodies as part of planning applications. That triggers a requirement for us to consult with the operator of that pipeline. Part of their consideration is a suitable buffer around the pipeline for safety reasons, and also to allow them reasonable access for maintenance or any work that needs to be done to the pipeline. Obviously, that's been taken into account by the applicants in coming up with their proposed layout, and that company is satisfied that there's no safety or maintenance issue that would necessarily arise from this development. In terms of the reference to the unfortunate incident, that is me simply reporting the content of some objections. I believe this is in reference to an unfortunate incident indeed, which occurred not far from the application site some years ago, involving Harry Collinson. I think that's what the objection is referring to there. Personally, I don't think it's particularly material to the consider of this application, and I don't really want to sort of elaborate any further with regards to that point, if I'm honest.
Thank you, Henry, and I think it would be totally inappropriate to actually refer to it. So I think we can just take that totally out of our minds. That was a completely separate incident. I've got Councillor Mr. Clare, you wish to come back in?
I'm terribly sorry. I'm going to leave my camera off, John. I'm having terrible problems with reception here. I'm just following up the answer to the question that was given to my previous question about the accessibility measures being taken. and I was told that there was a condition in the application which would which would govern the way that the site will be used by people who have bought and are renting lodges there. Now, all I can see, I've just been looking at the conditions, all I can see in the conditions is that the development is 8. The development hereby approved shall only be operated in accordance with the Farm Experience Management Plan. Now, I've gone and I've looked at the Farm Experience Management Plan, and it contains simply farm experience rules, and there's 13 rules there, most of which seem to be sort of very general things, like sort of no smoking. For legal and health reasons, you must not smoke in any of the farm experience centre grounds. Haystacks expects guests to behave appropriately in good order and exhibit consideration of the rights and comforts at others of all times. No objects that may cause offence or bodily harm are permitted for use or containment on the park. Now, if that is what I was being told about, they just seem like the kind of rules that you might have on any campsite, for goodness sake. So I'm assuming that I've missed something here, and that is not what was being referred to in the answers to me. Colin, is that what's being referred to by the especially tranquil site that we're trying to create by a set of rules, or is there something else that I've missed? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, John. Mr. Ridgton, again, it's been referred to the officer. Are you happy with that? Yep, fine. Colin, would you like to come back?
Yeah, I just would like to clarify, Councillor Clare, that condition you referred to actually refers to 2 documents. There's a farm experience management plan. There's also the lodge management plan. I just wanted to check that you've actually seen both of those documents.
I'm sorry, everything's going so slowly. No, I haven't seen the lodge management plan. I'll have a look at that. Thank you very much, Colin. That's why I asked the question.
Thanks, John. Mark Davidson, you'd like to come in?
Thanks, Chair. Got some questions for Colin, really. Some of the things that are a bit confusing. I'm not usually on this committee, so I don't usually get as complicated things. So I haven't seen, there might be a document there, I might be the same as John Clare, but to deal with the manager's house, is there a commercial justification for having the manager's house? Because normally when I see applications, there has to be a commercial justification and why they need one. And the other thing is, if you've got a manager who lives there, are they not living there for longer than the period that you're talking about? Because they've obviously got limited time when people can live on the site. Yeah, so I'm sort of confused about that. I might have just missed it, but there we are. And another couple of questions. One, when you were showing the sites from the sort of time lapse type thing, I didn't think that was really fair, because the things I wanted to see the time lapse from was one, from the access, which I didn't think we got to see, and 2, from the point of view of the people who were objecting, who were obviously going to object from the nearby farms and things. So we didn't seem to see that. We just seemed to see it from the road. So I wanted to. I didn't think it was fair what you did, show it from those 2 places, but not the 2 places that were going to be contentious, really. So if you can just come back on them, please, Colin. Cheers.
So, Mr. Richard, Richard, could you come back in on the managers? Because clearly this also links into Councillor Frierson's point on behalf of Lanchester early on about the managers' accommodation, and then we'll move on to Colin for the second part to answer Councillor Davidson.
Yes, there's two conditions. Condition 4 refers to the manager's lodge occupation, and condition 5 refers to the holiday lodge occupation. As part of the application, we've also submitted business plans and cash flow plans demonstrating the sort of financial viability of it. And then in relation to the viewpoints, they were agreed with the landscape officer prior to being carried out. The sort of landscape guidance is that viewpoints are agreed from points where there's multi-users. So basically, it's not just from specific viewpoints. It's more about how that viewpoint is going to be experienced by multiple users. So that was agreed up front with the landscape officer.
Thank you, Mr. Richard. Henry, you want to come in, I think, instead of Colin?
Only because Colin's system crashed momentarily, but I think he's back in now. Could the question just be repeated by Mark Davinson if he's still requesting any further clarification, please?
Mark, do you want to come back in?
Yeah, if you don't mind, please. I did say at the start that I was asking the officer, not the applicant. So that's number one. But number two, I said, was there the applicant said that that there was a part of it that explained about the use and stuff, so I must have missed that. So that's all right. But what's the in the business plan? But I didn't really understand that part. So what I'm actually asking is if I can try and get this over properly this time. Why do they actually need a permanent manager's house? That's the bit that that hasn't been explained. When nobody wants to go there in, I don't know, in November or February, why do they need a permanent manager on site then? That's the type of thing that I was asking. So why can't it just be somebody who lives in the local area who goes up and sorts things out? Why is a permanent manager actually required? Thank you.
Over to you, Colin.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, sorry, I momentarily lost connection then, so I missed Councillor Davinson's question the first time around, but thanks for reiterating it. In terms of the manager's lodge, they're always tricky, managers' lodges, if I'm honest. Obviously, in terms of operation, general maintenance, security, securing adherence with any kind of management plan, I think it would be reasonable for an applicant to desire to have some kind of permanent presence on the site. I mean, and in response to your point about whether that would be needed in maybe the winter months, I think generally the holiday industry is seeing that year-round use of sites is increasing, but I do acknowledge, and there's a section in my report on this, I do acknowledge that actually the local plan policy seeks to avoid managers' lodges, if I'm honest, and there is a bit of discussion about that in my report. I think my view is, in this case, in the interests of trying to ensure that the park is managed in the way and is operated in the way in which it's being presented to us, I think it would be potentially beneficial to have some sort of presence on the site. But I accept that we wouldn't want to see that become just a lodge for permanent occupation. There are conditions proposed which would restrict the occupancy of that manager's lodge to somebody who is actually employed at the site. If there's a condition that also makes provision that if the site should cease to operate as a holiday park, or that occupation of the manager's lodge would then cease. I think so my view is that, subject to those controls, where we're not going to be left potentially with an isolated dwelling by itself, I think there's a reasonable case here for some form of manager's dwelling, but obviously that's for members to make their own judgment on that.
Thank you, Colin. So I've now got all the members who've expressed interest and officers. Sorry, County Jim Atkinson's just come in. Jim, you want to speak?
Sorry, just quickly, Chair. I was just going to say that after listening to the discussion, I haven't seen enough for the objections to demonstrably outweigh the benefits this morning. So from my point of view, I'd be looking to propose that we accepted the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. We're nearly at that point, Jim. So yeah, Ivan, Councillor June.
Yeah, I'm just bringing my toolbar up, Chair. Sorry about that. Yeah, I think that this is a very positive application, and I see this as a different application to ones we've had in the past where it's just been a holiday let. Therefore, I can quite see why we would need some form of live-on site manager, because it's not just about this holiday accommodation type situation. It's also about the learning side of things as well, and that makes it a much more desirable sort of application for me. I've listened to sort of the objections, and as in the same respect as Jim, would agree with what Jim has said, and I would be willing to second acceptance of this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ian. So we now moved into the debate. Mrs. Adamson, we're now into the debate. I did say I'd bring you back in to answer specifically questions, but I think Mr. Ridgeon's done the work for you, and that's what he's employed for.
No, I would love to speak, please, and clarify.
The problem is you can't do anything other than answer questions.
Yeah. Can we answer the questions that have been raised already? For example, Marie's concerns about privacy, hedging and so on. I mean, we have really taken that into account, and we fully intend to screen everything. So from their point of view, from their visual, they will not see anything. There will be a fence that will separate entirely. So there'll be nothing there for, none of the visitors.
Okay, so that's I'm sorry, Mum, but I've got to get careful. You can only answer questions.
Sorry, can I just add on that on the landscape plan, there is a hedge shown on that boundary.
Thank you. Brilliant. Thank you.
Can I mention accessibility as well? That we are going to start with 3 lodges, and when people book, we will have a telephone conversation to discover exactly what aids they need, and we'll make sure for that visit the aids will be there for them. We'll do an exit survey and we'll find out what we could do better. So when we commission the next lodges, the next rental lodges, we will improve on the previous one. So hopefully by the time we've actually got up to 9, we will have everything that we possibly could need.
Thank you, Mrs. Adamson. So we now move.
Yeah.
You're on mute, Chair.
Councillor Mr. Atkinson to its proposed acceptance. Councillor Mr. Jules proposed seconder. So we have a proposal, but that doesn't stop debate. Does any member wish to speak? No members that wish to speak, so therefore we have a proposal. Claire, can I come over to you?
Certainly, thank you, Chair. Yep. Councillor Atkinson, are you in favour or against the proposal? Sorry, you're on mute, Councillor Atkinson.
Yeah, I'm in favour.
Thank you. Councillor Bell?
Claire, before you go any further, Councillor Clare's come in to right to speak. I don't know whether it's too late. Councillor Clare?
I've already voted, Chair.
I know that's what I'm saying. I don't know whether it's too late for Councillor Clare to come in.
I'm quite happy not to speak, Chair. I was going to clarify my position on this. It's just that the sort of by the time I typed RTS and my system had responded, you'd moved on. It's okay. That's absolutely fine. I'll forego that.
Thank you for working with us, John. So back to you, Claire.
Thanks, Chair. Councillor Bell, are you for or against the proposal?
Yeah, thank you, Claire. Can I just clarify, because I haven't come into the meeting till late, so just before you take that vote, am I okay to still vote on that?
My advice, Chair, would be not if you've only just come in and haven't heard the presentation and the discussion.
Sorry, Councillor Bell, so we'll ignore you on this time, but I wouldn't dare ignore you anymore.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Councillor Clare?
Approval.
Councillor Corrigan?
Approval.
Councillor Davidson?
Against.
Councillor Jewell?
Approval.
Councillor Richardson?
Against.
Councillor Shuttleworth?
Approval.
Councillor Simpson?
Against.
Councillor Tillins, are you in the meeting?
No, Claire. Councillor Tinsley is not present.
Thank you. Councillor Wilkes.
I remain unconvinced about the screening, but it's not sufficient to not support this, so I approve.
Thank you. Chair, I make that 6-3 in favour of approval.
So therefore that has been granted planning permission. Can I say thank you very much to those members of the public who've joined us. Clearly you're entitled to stop and watch further, but if you want to leave, don't feel free to stop. So we now move on to the next item. The next item is land to the south of High Grange Way, Wingate. Can we move on to the officer? And in this particular case, it's going to be Henry. Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just try to share the presentation now. Has that come up for everyone yet?
Yes.
It appears to be it has, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got it.
Hasn't actually come up on mine yet. I'm just going to try and reshare that, sorry.
While Henry is looking and resharing, we have two speakers on this particular application. Councillor Mr. John Higgins, who is the local member, and Francis Nicholson, the applicant. Welcome to both of them. OK, thank you, Henry.
Thank you, Chair. So this application takes us to Wingate. It's a reserve matters application for 250 dwellings with associated highways, infrastructure, landscaping, public open space and sustainable urban drainage features pursuant to an outline planning permission. It's land to the south of the High Grange Way, Wingate. This slide shows the site location plan. The application site consists of a rectangular shaped parcel of land located adjacent to the village. The site is bound in the red line and extends to approximately 10.85 hectares and comprises currently of agricultural fields. There is a level change across the site with the land falling approximately 8 metres in a southeasterly direction. Directly north of this red line and the site is land currently being developed as a neighbouring residential estate comprising of 166 dwellings and associated works. This is referenced within the report as being a phase 1. To the east of the site is the Haswell to Hart former railway line and countryside walk, and beyond which lies open countryside and the A19. To the west of the site, playing fields are located, beyond which lies residential properties. To the south of the site are agricultural fields and open countryside beyond. The fields within the blue line shown on the plan are to be used as part of green infrastructure, which was agreed at the outline stage as a mitigation scheme to provide recreational space to offset the impact of the development upon the designated ecological areas on the coastline and at Castle Eden Dean. This next slide is an aerial view where you can see more clearly the nature of the site and surrounds. You can see north of the application site on this view how the neighbouring new residential development, referred to as phase 1, is gradually being built out. The purple annotations marked on this plan highlight designated public rights of way which run through and adjacent to the site, and there's a photograph that I'll refer to later from one of those. This is a proposed layout plan. It shows the main vehicular access point taken from the north through the newly developing estate to the north, which leads to Wellfield Road. A secondary route would also be available into the site by navigating through the new estate to the north via the existing residential street of Martindale Walk, which again eventually also leads onto Wellfield Road. A mix of 2, 3 and 4 bedroom properties will be provided, 25 units of which will be affordable homes as agreed at the outline approval. All dwellings would have front and rear gardens and off-street parking in the form of driveways or garaging, and visitor parking will be provided around the site. There's a feature central spine of open space with children's play space which runs along the line of a public footpath on a north-south axis. The roughly oval-shaped feature on the right-hand side of the image is a suds basin feature into which surface water from the development will be conveyed. These next two slides present the appearance and scale of a selection of the proposed dwellings. They're not all the proposed dwellings, just a selection of them. So as mentioned, there are a range of 2, 3 and 4 bed properties. Each are brick built with roof tiles. Some feature cladding, weatherboarding elements to them. This is a photograph. Unfortunately, it's not an up-to-date photograph, I'm afraid, as I have no more up-to-date ones available for the presentation this morning, but it does depict the location of the main access from Wellfield Road, which is now in situ and serves the neighbouring estate to the north, which is in the process of being built out. The bus stop shown in the image was required to be relocated farther north to facilitate that access provision. The access arrangements for the development were accepted at the outline stage, but they have remained a reserve matter and therefore to be finally agreed under this application, given that they required implementation as part of a neighbouring estate which still required to be built out, though it was deemed that that reserve matter could not be approved formally at the time of the outline application. This is a second photograph. This is a view looking north from one of the public footpaths. This one runs on an east-west axis at the southern end of the site. Part of this image is now built out at the far northern end, where the neighbouring residential estate is progressing. In terms of consultations and representations, on this Reserve Matters application, the statutory internal and external consultees were the Highway Authority, Drainage and Coastal Protection, Environment, Health and Consumer Protection, Ecology, Public Rights of Way, Landscape, Design and Conservation and Northumbrian Water, and no objections were raised subject to conditions as required. We've received no public comments from local residents, but Councillor Higgins, who is also registered to speak, has expressed concerns in regards to the impacts of the development on school and GP surgery capacity, parking provision and safety matters surrounding the provision and location of the SUDS feature, particularly in regards to children. In summary, planning permission was granted in outline in 2019 for the development of the site for the erection of up to 250 dwellings and the associated works. The principle of the development has been accepted at the outline stage and cannot be revisited under this Reserve Matters application. Matters material to this application relate directly to the access, appearance, layout, scale and landscape in the development. As stated, the principle of the access points to serve the development was already accepted under the outline permission, however. The appearance and scale of the dwellings proposed, their arrangement and layout as a residential estate, and the provision of a landscaping scheme to provide both a setting and some open space to serve the estate have been considered acceptable by officers. As a result, approval of the Reserve Matters is recommended. Thank you, Chair.
As always, thank you, Henry. So we now move on to Councillor Higgins. Councillor Higgins, as local member, over to you.
Morning, Mr. Chairman. I hope everyone's well. My name's Councillor John Higgins for the Wingate ward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to speak this morning against this planning application. I'd like to refer you to page 11.81 regarding the sub pond, and also the recommendation that fencing will not be required. It states in summary the basin will be dry vast majority of time. For smaller storm occasions, the water will be drained within minutes, and in significant 10 to 20 year flood event, the water would be drained within 24 hours. Mr. Chairman, historically, the village has a history of flooding. Ray Woodland View, the Front Street, Market Crescent, and the latter was only flooded again last year. This sub-pond will be close to the Haswood walkway, which is very well used by all age groups. It will be close to a number of housing estates, be close to Wellfield School, and it will only be approximately a 10-minute walk from the primary school. We all know the old saying, water attracts children. The village is approximately 3 miles square. We already have 4 ponds and a beck. Sadly, over the years, we've had a number of fatalities. The last thing the village needs is another pond, especially one that will not be safe and secure when it's been recommended that there's no need for this sub-pond to be fenced off. I'd like to refer you to page 6.41. I did in my email ask for highways to be put down as an objection, but it's not on the report there. Highways state they have no objections, sorry. I'd like to bring to your attention the entrance to Wellfield Road is approximately 160 yards from the A19 Slip Road junction. When you leave the housing estate from either exit onto Wellfield Road, you'll only travel a few hundred yards to the B181 junction. There are already horrendous problems trying to access this road. During the present first phase, and unfortunately the photograph, like the officer said, doesn't give you an up-to-date picture of the exact exit. But during the first phase of Wellfield development, which is classified in the report as phase 1, near the advanced entrance, the road was altered. This has now led to this road being dangerous, and it's also a racetrack. It's waiting for an accident to happen. If these highways problems are not addressed, it will only get a lot worse once we have the additional vehicles from the this proposed application. And I also note there's no Section 106 funding down for road safety in this present application. I also note there's no daily site work and hour restrictions. Also no delivery access restrictions on Wellfield Road leading to the development. And I would like members to consider implementing restrictions. I also consider there's not enough parking bays in the current application. Mr. Chairman, I do fully understand that outline planning permission has been granted, but I would like to add that prior to the phase 1, our nursery and primary schools were well oversubscribed before the development, which is currently ongoing. I note there's no 106 section funding allocated for nursery education, and I also note there's no 106 funding being allocated for our GP surgeries. You were not consulted during this planning application, outline planning application. I've met with both GP surgeries, and you've confirmed that and said that you would struggle to accommodate the additional residents without any additional funding. Not only am I Ward Council for Wingate, Mr. Chairman, I'm also a member of Wingate Parish Council, which also do not support this planning application. I'm surprised, Mr. Chairman, that the Parish Council's objection against this planning application is not included in this report. It was sent by letter and email on the 31st of March. Mr. Chairman, because of the health and safety concerns that I have raised regarding the sub-pond and highways, I would like the committee to consider refusing this current planning application. Again, Mr. Chairman, thank you for allowing me to speak against this planning application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Higgins. Thank you, John. Henry, there are a number of issues that Councillor Higgins has referred to there. Do you want to come back and address them?
Yes, I will do. There's some points which I'd like to also defer to John McGargle to comment on regarding highways, and also my colleague Brian Weatherall, who's joined us to help with the suds and drainage explanation. But just covering some of the points which it's for me to comment on. It's important, first of all, just to understand that this is effectively kind of a two-part application process, in that there's the outline permission and the reserve matters, which we're now considering. So some of the points which Councillor Higgins has referenced there, there are conditions which are actually on the outline planning permission, which do still we still apply to the development overall. So that's why some of the matters regarding, for instance, working hours and construction management measures, things like that, they are covered on the outline planning permission, which the developer does need to adhere to. But there's no requirement for us to repeat those elements on the reserve matters, because the planning permission has to be read as a whole. Similarly, with regards to references to section 106 offer, there is actually a significant suite of section 106 which does apply to the site. It's just, again, that there's no requirement for us to enter into another legal agreement, again, under the reserve matters. It's all handled under the outline planning permission. I can summarise what the content of that is, which is 10% affordable housing, a financial contribution of 369,000 towards recreation and sporting provision, a contribution of £715,000 towards primary education, a contribution of £84,000 towards cycling link improvements, and a contribution of £160,000 towards public rights of way improvements. There wasn't a dedicated financial contribution towards highways improvements, because the view on that is that the access arrangement design itself was acceptable. Regarding the comments on the parish council, I'd probably just have to come in maybe a little bit later on, just to have another review of that and see if I could just check on the file about the latest comments on the parish council. Regarding the health contributions, we did consult, but what we do is that we consult with our contacts at the NHS and Clinical Care Commission at the outline stage. So there's officers within those authorities who effectively are in touch with the surgeries, but also actually organise kind of surgery capacity, and it's those officers that we liaise with. We don't consult directly with each individual surgery. It's very similar to schools, in that when we're dealing with schools, as we're probably more familiar with because it's a little bit more common, is that we contact the council's own school organisation manager, and they liaise with us on what the requirements are. It's the same with health. We don't consult the surgeries necessarily directly. We didn't receive any comments at the outline stage. There were no objections, but unfortunately there weren't actually any comments at all, but we did consult them. I know that on the phase 1 development, which at that point had already had planning permission, we did receive comments from the health organisation, and they stated that they could cater for the capacity of that development acceptably. We didn't receive any comments regarding the outline stage of this second phase. But just coming back to some of the points of my presentation, unfortunately we're now in a stage where the only matters we consider are those directly related to the reserve matters. We can't revisit matters of principle under this application, so I don't consider those matters a material to the outcome of this application. Regarding the highways and drainage matters, I'd like to defer to John and Brian, though, if they could come in with a bit more detail. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Henry. John, Brian, who wants to come first?
Thank you, Chair. I'll address the highways issues, Chair. Access to phase 1 of the development is taken from Wellfield Road at the location which Henry showed where the existing bus stop lay-by is placed. That access was assessed as a priority junction. The existing speed limits on Wellfield Road were assessed, and a suitably designed and safe access into development from Wellfield Road has been established. On the matter of the B181 leading to the A19, there is actually a signalised junction from Wellfield Road joining the A181 to be constructed. A significant signalisation of that junction together with the slip road of the A19. That has been agreed with Highways England and that is to be delivered. The layout of the scheme, which is subject to this application, has been assessed in terms of its highway acceptability. It is designed for a 20 mile per hour internal highway layout, and that's considered acceptable. With regards to parking, most units have 2 parking spaces as per our parking standards. There are visitor non-allocated parking spaces which are well distributed throughout the development, and there's a number of spaces within each of the cul-de-sacs along the central sort of circulatory road. So as far as highways are concerned, the scheme is acceptable. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, John. Brian?
Hello, thank you, Chair. Just to discuss about the Suds Pond, the Suds Basin, sorry, I think it's important to know that it is not a pond that it's going to be. I think it's just to get the term correctly. It is going to be a basin. And I just briefly outline how it's going to work, just for the benefit of everyone. A site of this size would ordinarily produce somewhere in the region of 350-400 litres a second of surface water to be conveyed off into the downstream environment. To prevent and reduce the risk of flooding downstream and any off-site premises neighbours, we set a flow restriction which is based around the average runoff that the field would have produced without the development, and it's set in this case to about 50 litres a second. So there's quite a reduction in runoff. That generates a lot of flood water which must be stored in these larger events, and the basin's designed to store what we call the 1 in 100 year rainfall event, plus an allowance for climate change of around 40%. This generates several thousand cubic metres of water which must be stored. These are designed in accordance with national guidance, which all authorities use, and the guidance for a Suds Basin, which only holds water to its maximum level in that extreme event, is that they shouldn't be fenced and they should be open and accessible and dual use, used as amenity space. The chances of it being full are less than once in a lifetime event. It's such a rare event, but of course different storms, different levels, there will be a certain amount of water in. Normal rainfall, there'll be a low flow through the bottom, a bit like a small water course. The larger 20-30 year events, there may be several hundreds of millimetres of water, but it'll only be full in that once in 100 year plus climate change allowance event. So the national guidance is that we shouldn't fence them, because the vast majority of the time it's simply open space and a grassed area. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brian. Henry, you want to come back in regards to the query on the parish council?
Yeah, just to say, we just had another check on the file, and afraid on our file we've got no comments from the parish council. So, you know, I don't know if Councillor Higgins has a separate email, and obviously we can try to see if we can have a look at those comments, but our records show we haven't had feedback from the parish council, Chair.
Thank you very much, Henry. If we now move on to the supporters for the application, can I welcome Francis Nicholson on behalf of Bellway? You have 5 minutes to present to the meeting. Over to you.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
I don't want to take up too much of your time or repeat many of the points made by the officers who've dealt with this case. However, I thought it would be beneficial just to forward the views of the developer and also give you the opportunity to ask Bellway any questions should you have any. Bellway became involved in the scheme at the back end of last year after it was granted outline planning permission for 250 units back in July. The principles of the scheme were set at that point, including the site access, the site size, the drainage basin, the number of units and the designated landscaping and green infrastructure areas, as well as the financial contributions under the Section 106 agreement. In light of the site's existing outline planning permission, Bellway submitted the follow-on reserved matters for the site in February this year, which confirmed the finer elements of the design. This included the layout, the house types, the elevational treatments and the planting scheme. Throughout the entire process, Bellway worked positively and proactively with officers to come up with a good quality design. We've engaged with officers and taken on board feedback at every opportunity, through the detailed pre-application discussion to refining the layout further during the determination phase. Having gone through the Council's design review panel, we are left with a scheme which predominantly has green scores on the detailed design elements. Aforementioned, the principle of the development on this site has already been established by this regulatory committee at the outline planning permission stage. There were no reasons to warrant its refusal from an environmental or technical perspective. Bellway have subsequently designed a scheme in consultation with Durham officers, which is considered to be of good quality design. We've worked hard to ensure the future potential of the site is one where it is vibrant and safe for new and existing residents, creating a development in an area which we can be proud of and proud of its design. I appreciate the points on highway safety. I know they're not included in Section 106, but as mentioned, there is actually a planning condition associated with the outline planning permission, which accounts for the off-site highway improvement works and the signalisation down the A181 and on the slip road onto the A19. So in light of that, we would thoroughly appreciate your support in helping us to deliver this site and respectfully request that you grant us approval on that basis. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Nicholson. At this moment in time, I've got no members asking to speak or ask any questions. So therefore, finally, Henry, do you want to sum up, or do we go? Would you like us to go straight into member debate?
I'm happy to go straight into the debate.
OK, thank you. Thanks very much. Councillor Mr Shuttleworth. John?
Thank you, Chairman. We passed the outline of this in last year, so we can't unpass it. So based on what I've heard, I'm prepared to move acceptance, move approval of the recommendation.
Thank you, John. And the other John, Mr Clare, John Clare.
You'll notice, Chair, that I got in straight away this time. Just a number of points. First of all, I have to congratulate Councillor Higgins on coming forward with these points. I wish that all local members were as careful about applications in their ward as this, and is to be congratulated. The point, of course, is that many of the points raised, unfortunately, should have been raised at the first stage, not at reserved matters. I want to make comments about three of the things he's mentioned, though. The first one is GPs. This is coming up more and more, Chair, that we sort of there's a difference in perception. People come forward and say GPs are crammed, you can't get any appointments, and yet you're building more houses. And yet at the same time, the NHS is saying nothing to report, no problems here. That's maybe something that may need a wider addressing in a wider way. Maybe we need to go to the surgeries rather than to the NHS, because this is a continual complaint. As regards roads and highways, also, this is another area where there's very often discontinuity between what local people perceive of a road and what highways report of a road. And on this situation, on a planning application, people just need to understand that on a planning application, highways tell us the facts of the matter, and sort of we can't proceed on people's perceptions of the matter. And the final thing I've got to say about SUDS, I think the officer for his his contribution, which explained it very well. But I would just point out this is something that's very often happens. We've got a suds pond here coming, sort of can we fence it off? And the answer is that we've addressed this in a number of applications, and the answer has to be no. And the only thing that I would say is that the weather which would cause a pond, a suds pond, to fill up with water is not going to be the weather that people are going out playing. It's going to be absolutely foul and torrential rain, flood causing conditions, and so the likelihood of human beings playing around the pond at a time when it's full is going to be highly unlikely. When we come to the vote, I'm going to move that we approve the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, John. Mark, Councillor Wilk.
Thank you, Chair. I've got significant sympathy for the local member, and I believe that the outline application originally, it was Councillor Richardson that said that he'd never heard such a damning report from a local member about a planning application when it was at outline phase. And I think at the time it was Councillor Leo Taylor, actually, who sadly passed away. I just must comment on what Councillor Clare said. When you look at the previous outline report, all of these issues were very seriously discussed and challenged by members of the committee at the time. And there was a lot of serious concerns raised about all of the issues that's been raised by the local member, and some of that I think is starting to come to fruition here. And the concern that I've got is that you get a planning application comes in at outline phase, and then years later down the line, when we can see that there's issues, we're stuck with not being able to deal with it, particularly in relation to things like schools and particularly in relation to GP surgeries. And I really do feel that it's time that there was some kind of change in the national legislation as to what is and isn't reserved matters and what should and shouldn't be decided at outline phase. Because it strikes me that developers seem to be able to get away with bringing forward very large developments. In this case, I think this original development was about 20% of the size of the original village. And we get either no comment from the NHS or we get told it's okay at the moment, and then you get other developments come along, and down the line you find that what's been put in place is simply no longer acceptable for the village. You've got situations where GP surgeries are incapable of managing. In some cases where we can't get doctors into a particular area, and we find that we've got fewer GPs than we had originally at the time of the original application. And I do think that the government needs to look at when particular elements of outline and reserve matters are actually dealt with, because you can end up 4 or 5 years down the line when the original application is no longer relevant to the circumstances of the village. I've also got sympathy with the local member in relation to this pond area, the sustainable drainage, and I have discussed this by email with some of the officers. I actually disagree with what Councillor Clare's just said in that oh, it's raining, so kids won't go out and play. Well, if there's going to be water standing there that's anything up to several feet deep for up to 24 hours, it won't be raining 24 hours later. I see no reason why a fence couldn't have been put around the whole of this area with a gate which was only accessible for children of a certain age or for parents to be able to open. And it just seems to me like an excuse to not spend some money to make sure that this area is safe for the people who are going to live there and for the rest of the residents in the village and their children. So I've got a lot of sympathy with the local members' views. Unfortunately, I don't believe that those concerns are sufficient for us to be able to do anything at this stage. And in that respect, I do agree with what Councillor Clare said before, that because it wasn't dealt with at the time, back in 2017, there just isn't enough there for us to be able to block this. So what I would urge is that the developer looks at some kind of sympathetic means of fencing off this area whilst still allowing it to be accessed, because I don't believe it's going to cost a huge amount of money to do that. And there was probably quite a lot of funding there for open space provision and other things. So there must be some way that working with the local member, the parish council and the developer, that we can put something in there to make that area safe, because the last thing we want is to see somebody get hurt because of the fact that we haven't put a fence in place. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mark. When you talk about alterations to the planning system, I think the case is watch this space, because the government is determined to change. So some of what you say may happen then. I've got in line Councillor Jim Atkinson, then Councillor George Richardson, and then Councillor Alan Bell. So can we start with Jim?
Yes, Chair, this won't take me long. Just again, looking at the objections relative to the benefits and looking at that huge number, the way I'm looking at it, £1.3 million worth of 106 money. Those are clear benefits, not to mention the benefits we're going to get from the rates for everybody in the community. So I'd just be happy to second Councillor Shuttleworth's proposal. We accept the recommendations, especially as I'm not, no letters of objections have been received from the members of the public as well, which I think helps the case along a little bit. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jim. I'm sorry to upset you, Jim, but Councillor Clare going before you. He's actually Councillor Clare seconded, but thanks for that, Jim. George, Councillor Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Once again, it's nearly all been said and it's all been done in the past. I would like to congratulate John Higgins on the way he presented his case, but it's sort of shutting the stable door after the horse is bolted in that case, most cases. I had written down concerns about school capacity at Wellfield, insofar as I have a granddaughter goes to that school and another one at the nursery school. And we saw from Bellway's presentation, Miss Nicholson, I do believe, house types. I'm interested again in the size of these houses and the one with a garage. And I would like her response, if that's all right with yourself, to ask if you can actually get a car into that garage and then get out of it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sorry, I do apologise if I call you Miss Nicholson and Mrs. But Miss Nicholson, can you answer that one?
Yeah. Sorry, it's a bit slow to mute there. So there are variants of house types on the site. All the houses have got the same size garage, regardless of what size the house is. And to be honest with you, over the past few years, within the planning system, developers have started building in accordance with new guidelines that all local authorities have started to bring out, where a garage is 6 metres by 3 metres wide. Because I think in the past it was acknowledged that some of these garages were actually just a bit too small to fit in a family car. But as I say, over the past few years, we're now all building these 6 metres by 3 metre size garages, regardless of what size house they are. So that there should be more than, adequate enough to fit a family car size in there.
George, do you want to come back?
No, I accept that. It's still not big enough, but hey, what am I? Never mind, thank you.
Thank you, George. Finally, Councillor Alan Bell. Alan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, and I fully support this application. And I'd also like to put on the record, we have Bellways in our division, absolutely really good with engaging with the local members. All in all, very happy with them, a good developer. What I did have a concern about, and I will echo what Mark Wilkes says, is regarding the SUDs, because we do have one at the front of the development what I've just referred to, and every time I pass it, I can't help but wonder to myself, as an accident waiting to happen, if a toddler was to wander off out of view of any adults at any stage, if there was water in the bottom. I really think it's maybe is something worth looking at and discussing. Such a small cost to put any kind of sort of secure fencing around them, rather than sort of sitting back and sort of just watching and waiting for any accidents to happen. But obviously I appreciate today in this form it's not the place to take that up, but I would definitely support sort of further discussions within the planning department, or where there's to be discussed that in order to try and alleviate that problem. But happy to support the application. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Alan. So I've got nobody else registered to speak. No. Claire, would you like to take the vote? Because I have a proposal by Councillor Shuttleworth, seconded by Councillor Clare, that we accept the recommendations from the officer.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Councillor Atkinson, are you for or against?
I'm for.
Councillor Bell?
For.
Councillor Clare?
For.
Councillor Corrigan?
For.
Councillor Davidson?
For.
Councillor Jewell?
For.
Councillor Richardson?
Against, just a protest vote.
Councillor Shuttleworth?
For.
Councillor Wilkes?
For.
Chair, that's 8-1.
Thank you very much. So that's been given planning permission. Yeah, I reiterate what Councillor Mr. Wilkes said. Councillor Higgins did an excellent representation of the people of Wingate, and his predecessor, Councillor Taylor, when this came to the first time, did just as equally and said the same points, John. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. There has been an issue, and I asked the IT gentleman who is listening, there has been an issue, obviously, earlier on with members receiving the presentations. So I would ask if IT could have a look at that to make sure in the future that doesn't happen, but it didn't stop anybody being able to participate. Once again, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Could we remain quiet until we're told that we are disconnected from the recording?